Hey everyone, Jeremy, National Fire Radio. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, Tyler Evans, the Citizens Fireman podcast, the Citizen Fireman's social media, TCF. Tyler, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, Jeremy. I've been a big fan of NFR for a long time.
It's always funny when people say things like that to me because I've just been doing the same thing for years and years, right? And it's like, I think what matters most is consistency and longevity. And when people tell me they're a fan, that makes me feel that what we're doing matters and that people are still paying attention, which I think is important. So thank you for that. I always appreciate those kind words, but you're doing your own thing too, man. And I think that that's one of the most important things to me is like how I judge the impact that we're making with National Fire Radio over the last 6 years is how many other people are willing to step out of the shadows and start taking a lead in this game. And I think that that's important. I see that you're doing that.
Trying to, at least. You know, we've been pushing for about 2 years now, and it really seemed to took off here lately. And it's kind of flooded me and surprised me with some of the avenues that's opened up for us and the different ways we've been able to spread out across the fire service ourselves. But I'm excited for it. Just got to find the time to pull it all off.
Well, what's the idea behind it? I mean, what got you started with TCF, right? So, the Citizens Fireman, social media. Where did that all come from? Because it takes something, right? It's not like you woke up one day and you were just like, I'm going to do this. So what's the intent behind it? Where did it come from? Why did you start it? Like, what's the story?
So it's a little bit of a long story, but
Good.
I work for Athens. It's a smaller department here in East Tennessee. We run a battalion, 2 engine companies, a 3-man engine and a 4-man engine.
Nice.
Hopefully about to break ground. We just got land for a 3rd station, going to staff our first aerial. So
Nice.
That'll be a big game changer for the department. But back some years ago, probably 2-3 years ago, I was a driver for the department, and I fell into what I felt like was a little bit of engineer syndrome. So smaller department, like I said, we just picked up running medical response. So before we ran medical, like we were super late to the whole first response party. We used to be known every time we went around the state to classes. People were like, hey, you're the guys that don't run medical. But we picked it up just in time for COVID to hit. But, there were days where things were really slow. I remember coming in as a firefighter before I had a wife and kids, and I worked overtime constantly, and I worked a 96-hour shift out of our Station 1, came in Monday morning and went home Friday morning. I ran 2 calls, 2 fire alarms.
Right.
So it was a slower department back then. The face of the department's changed a lot, new administration, but I fell into that engineer syndrome to where I felt like foolishly I'd been promoted above the level of firefighter. I felt like I was a good operator, and I just kind of came to work and just fell into my groove and did my thing. And consequently, I fell out of love with the job.
Wow.
I went to a Bears of the Oath class. It's where I met Shane Bentley, Kevin Pfluger, Tom Hollick, some of the greatest people that I could ever meet. And that class absolutely kicked my ass. They had skill stations set up, everything from forcible entry, a ladder station. Of course, Kevin and Tom had their engine op stuff going around on the backside. And every one of those skill stations kicked my ass. And I drove back home. It was a 2-day class, and we drove down there both days. And the car ride back was like 2.5 hours to get back to the house was just silent. And just sitting there like, what am I going to do? Like, because I knew that I loved the job more than that deep down. And I was disappointed in myself and to those cracks and crevices I'd let myself fall down into. And it was kind of a fork in the road there, kind of telling yourself, you're going to have to kick your ass in high gear and figure it out, or you're going to have to find something else to do, because we're not going to hold a seat on the rig acting like this and performing like this.
That's powerful stuff, bro. I mean, at least you got yourself to go to the class. A lot of guys get super complacent and comfortable, and they don't even put themselves out there because they know they're lacking, and now they're not even going to go try and do anything. And at least you got yourself up out of the chair to go do it. But man, that is a moment. I've had those moments where you sit there and it is a silent car ride home, where you're reflecting on, like, who really am I? I tell people and show people one thing, but is that truly who I am? And that's a moment, man. That's profound.
And to me, that's one of the reasons to this day it's still my favorite class I've ever went to, because I owe more to those 2 days than any other training, any other involvement on the job that I've ever had, because it's what brought me back around to it. So I spent some time catching myself back up and really focusing on those basic firefighter level skills again. You know what we go back to every time. It's all about basics. And ended up, I'm under contract still with the Army Reserves, and got the chance to go to the Army's basic leadership course in February of 22, I believe it was.
Okay.
Yeah, 2022. And it was a super long car ride. About the first hour, I was going by myself, driving my POV. So about the first hour, I listened to music, and I got tired of listening to music, so I switched over to podcasts, and I started listening to NFR. And actually, the episode that I was listening to was with Mike Nasty from Tip of the Spear Leadership.
Yeah.
And Mike played a big part in helping me get my podcast up and going, and kind of showing me. He introduced me to the Riverside platform and things like that. But through listening to some of these podcast stuff, I mean, I had hours of nothing but open interstate. And once I got to the class, it's a 29-day class, and it's a gentleman's course, so it's not like really strenuous. You go do your classroom stuff in the day, and then if you don't have an essay or a project to work on in the evening, just kind of go back to the barracks and do whatever you want, because they call it gentleman course, but the place that I went to for it, they don't allow you to leave post or anything like that unless it's for a pass. So there wasn't a whole lot to do, and I was like, well, I'm going to spend some of this time to kind of double effort this, work on some Army stuff, and I'm going to, while I've got a month away from work, try to get myself just locked in the game, because the shift before I left for BLC, I was promoted to captain. So I had one shift as a company officer and left for a month and came back. And by that point, I was a million times more comfortable than what I was leaving that Bears of the Oath class as an engineer.
Yeah.
So I wasn't stepping into that seat, what I would say, behind the eight ball, but we're a very, very young department. So we're behind the eight ball every time somebody steps into a seat. I mean, it's a learning curve, no matter how long you've been on the job, to step into that next level up. But I got to spend a lot of that time to really dive back into the fire service. And, there's a lot of great stuff out on social media. There's some shitty stuff out there too.
Sure.
But sitting in the barracks alone, that was kind of the way that I was keeping myself involved while I was away. So I was just scrolling different social media pages, watching different videos I could find. And the idea struck me that I was going to start my own Instagram page, and that was going to be a way to... Oh, my camera just lost.
And the joys of podcasting, unforeseen technical issues. I never have technical issues. This is the second one I've had probably in the last 2 or 3 recordings now. I don't understand what happened. The camera shut off. Your camera shut off. Mine won't come back on. I had to switch cameras. This is the nightmare of podcasting, bro. This is the stuff nobody sees or gets to deal with,
Yeah, it's like I said, man, I've never had that problem with Riverside before, but I lost a full recording with John Norman, and I almost cried over that, because
I would have cried over that, yes.
It was so hard, and I was embarrassed to go back to him and tell him, because he was super excited about the episode.
Yeah.
And it was so hard for us to schedule and get it locked in, because his wife had some health problems in the midst of all of it as well, but luckily we got to redo it, and at the end of the day, I got to spend 2 hours picking his brain as opposed to 1, but it was still really stressful to lose that recording.
Yeah. No, I totally get that for sure. I want to do this. I want to circle back before our interruption there. You were talking about the importance of TCF and those long car rides and taking accountability for yourself through the job, and realizing that you needed to go all in, hold yourself more accountable, and TCF was a way to self-motivate, right?
It was. And also, before I got promoted to company officer, I came to a point to one of those where I thought the grass looked greener, and I was really close to leaving my department and starting over and going to a big city. I had applied at Knoxville, Tennessee, and went all the way through their hiring process, and all the way through I kind of balanced the pros and the cons, and I ended up right before, because I was torn between it, and I knew that there was going to be a chance for promotion at Athens, and I didn't want to pull out after the fact. If I was going to stay in Athens, I didn't want to let that be known after I'd been promoted, and kind of, I feel like that would kind of leave a bad taste, which it was still really close and really kind of hurt some bridges there. They weren't burned, but took a while to kind of build some stuff back.
I get it.
But I decided to stay where I was, my hometown department. You know, I live here in Athens. It's where my family is. It's super easy to, having a wife and kids, to be able to run down the street to the house and the engine when you're on for 24. So that and some other stuff, I decided to stay, but I still wanted more involvement in the job than what I was getting just working my regular scheduled 24/48. And like you said, I also needed some way to keep myself accountable and not fall back into that stage that I was for a while as an engineer.
So
And
go
TCF
ahead.
was born. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it came out of.
I think there's a lot of similarities there between myself and you in regards to accountability. I find that doing this show and being out there and speaking holds me more accountable than I've ever been before, especially when it comes to my own performance. And I got things to do, man. I got work to do. It's not, you don't get to turn it around overnight, and you have your ups and downs. And I think that that's just part of life, not just in the firehouse, but in life in general. And it's, this for me, though, certainly has held me more accountable to at least my message. I'm very careful where I go with the conversation. I'm very careful with my talking points. I have to make sure that what I am going down the road with, I can back up. And I think what happens a lot of times is people get super complacent and comfortable. You were saying it yourself. You had quote-unquote engineer syndrome, right? Where you were getting comfortable in your own zip code and finding yourself not pushing to continually better yourself. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. And when you're talking about doing a 24-hour tour and turning the wheel twice, like, that becomes very challenging, because how do you stay motivated? How do you stay focused? It's very hard to do.
It's easy to fall into that when you work in a job and, some smaller, slower departments. You've got the ability to go into work and ride a recliner, eat 3 hot meals, and get a full night's sleep on the majority of your days at work. It's real easy to just fall into that, and to where you meet those guys to where they kind of treat the job like it's their day off. They come into work and it's more concern about, well, I need to rest up today because the kids at home have wore me out. And I mean, everybody's going to have a long day every now and then. I'm not saying that you're just the biggest dirtbag in the fire service if you come in and you need to kind of take it slow for a day. But, the guys that they come in and that's all they do. They've been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years. You worry more about your side jobs than you do about what you're doing on the job, on the rig. And there's departments out there that it's easy to do that at.
Yes.
It falls down to, for us, we're not a big policy-driven department. We've got policies in place where they need to be, but we're not policy to death. So a lot of it comes down to the battalion chiefs and the company officers of what we need, what we want to do, how we want to operate our crew for the day. And it's real easy in some departments to kind of fall to the wayside.
Oh, I believe that wholeheartedly, and it's not just in the career departments too, but it's also in the volunteer departments, right? It's the when you don't have a group of self-motivated people, right? It doesn't need to be the busiest department in the world, but if the guy next to you is sitting in the recliner, and the other guy across from you is sitting on the recliner, and the other guy's on his phone or playing video games, it's very hard to get up and go outside and work out, or throw a ladder, or go out and learn a district, right? Or whatever it is. It's very hard to do that, and it's really who you surround yourself with. You need to be constantly feeling a sense of motivation, and what I really came to understand is good cultures promote that, and they, even on your day where you do need to take a break, right? You got worn out the day before, you had some family problems, family issues, or you're newborn at home and you're not getting a lot of sleep, whatever it is. You come into the firehouse, yes, I need today to be a quiet day, man. Knock on wood, I hope we get a quiet day. I don't really feel like doing anything. You're allowed to have those days. But that's where the other guys pick you up that day. And they go, bro, we get it, man. Take a back seat. We'll take care of things today. We need you. Just get involved, you know? And I think that that's where a really strong culture then allows for people to excel and flourish.
Absolutely. And, you know, talking about the just picking people up, and I mean, firefighters, we all know we're products of our environment. And the people that you surround yourself with, the places you put yourself is wholeheartedly going to dictate who you become. And I was lucky enough whenever I got promoted to a captain on the engine, my engineer for the past 2 years has been my best friend from high school.
Nice.
So we came on to the volunteer department together. I like to joke around and say that I ruined his life because he was planning on going and being a TVA mechanic and making a lot of money, and I talked him into becoming a career firefighter. So we came on the job at Athens probably like 4, 5, 6 months apart from each other. But he's a motivator, man. He helps me with TCF. I mean, we've been best friends for like 10 years, and whenever I got promoted, you know, I was back into the fire service, but one of the biggest things I was lacking on was fitness. I could not keep myself in a gym to save my life.
I get it.
But he is big into it. Has been. He lost a bunch of weight. I mean, turned his life around when it came to that aspect. And as a new company officer, he was going to the gym every shift, and I was like, all right, if your engineer's going to go, you've got to go. It's like, if the engineer and the captain's going to go, the firefighter doesn't have a choice. So, I mean, it's informal leadership. He's picking up. He's got days where he comes in.
On, man.
100%. You know, it's not the bugles that drive us to do what we do every day. It's the people riding the back step. It's those guys that are plugged in everywhere in the firehouse that they know their niche and they drive it home every time they walk through the door.
That's what I love, an environment where winners win. And, you know, we need to be constantly pressing our people to want to do more. And when their culture and environment starts to suffer when people get complacent and comfortable. And the problem, though, is that runs rampant, not just in the fire service, but in all professions across the board. And it's, what are you willing to do about it? Are you willing to get up and go move? Are you willing to be motivated? You know, you said that your department's not a policy-focused fire department. You have policies where they need to be, right? But other than that, there's a lot of discretion within the fire service. You have the ability to make audible plays on the fire ground. You have the ability to plan out your day from the second you come in, from, you know, whether you have roll call or you're checking in and getting your equipment checked and equipment on the rig, you start your tour. Whatever your days look like, it's all gray, right? It's all about, like, when the tones drop, so we can be very fluid in our decision making, but we should have foundational check boxes, for lack of better words, because I hate check boxes, but foundational things that we need to do throughout the day, and we need to make sure that we meet those, but it doesn't mean that it has to be rigid and driven by policy. And so that's where we need motivators and creators and excitable people and people that are interested in being there. That's where you really start to see a dynamic unfold that pushes the boundaries of how good this job can be.
100%. And one of the things I feel like we get into with departments like mine is you get a lot of individual crew cultures. So different, like
individual personalities, like each company has their own, or each crew has their own personality, if you will.
Yes, and the shifts tend to kind of match each other, but even, I mean, you go from station 1 to station 2, and some of the things that they do, not operationally wise on scene, I mean, we come together on scene and everything just clicks. I mean, we're doing group training, stuff like that, but just the day-to-day in the firehouse, it can be completely different. You know, you got one station that they may eat out 3 times a day, and you got another station that the guys are walking in the morning, each of them carrying a damn cooler full of food. And
right.
We're gonna burn every cast iron in the kitchen up over the next 24 hours.
I love that.
But well, it makes it fun, and we're still trying to build on it. You know, I've been a company officer for almost 2 years now, and we're still trying to figure out. We just got a new firefighter, came from station 1 up to 2 with us probably 6 months ago, and that's working out great. Love the guy to death, but we're still trying to push ourselves into that role that we want to be in every time we come to work. and to do things to make us better and to keep from falling out of those roles. Like I said, we're not running a staffed aerial, so we're kind of engines that do all until that truck gets here and once it's staffed eventually. But some of the things we're trying to push towards is, every morning during SCBHX, turn that into a mask up drill. Stretch a ladder or throw a ladder every shift. Stretch a line every shift. And make sure that those are kind of those check boxes for us, at least training wise, and then throw those all together for at least an hour of some hands-on training at the end of the day as well.
How do you instill new benchmarks like that in a culture that might not have had that before? I think a lot of people struggle with going from we've become lazy and complacent to we're looking to kind of pick up the standard a little bit here. How do you implement that without pushing others away? Like you want the environment to be inviting, and you want to find those guys that are comfortable to start maybe getting a little uncomfortable and making it okay for them to be willing to get uncomfortable. So we can't just pound our chest and go all in on it and be like, you need to be a part of this. We're doing this now, right? So there's finding that balance so that you can really start to change and turn the corner and change to the culture that you're looking for, right? Is that what you're going through?
No, and like I said, I'm super blessed with the two guys I've got on the truck with me. Yeah. Whenever it comes to stuff like that, the hard hitting, just fireman level stuff, if one of us has an idea, every single time everybody's on board with it.
I love it.
Somebody comes into work and like, I feel like I'm slacking on this. Can we start throwing this into our day-to-day stuff? And there's nobody, not once has anything been brought up since I've been up there in my role that I'm in now that's really had any pushback. So like I said, I know that goes on in the fire service and I hate it.
Yeah.
But I'm lucky enough, at least for right now, that that's not a bridge that we've had to cross yet.
But you have an environment that allows for it. You have an environment where one of your guys can come in and be like, you know what? I just saw this the other night. I'm not good at this, or this isn't my strong point. Can we work on this? That is humility. And most people, a lot of people, I should say, don't have that, or the firehouse culture doesn't allow for them to have it because they're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to tell you that they might not be proficient in knots or stretching or whatever, right? Pumping. Like there's 1,000 variables that in a million jobs that we have to do every single day on the fire ground. You're not going to be strong at every single one of them. Are you willing to admit your deficiency and say, hey, guys, I want to focus on this because I need to get better? That's hard for guys to do.
It is, and especially going back to that small department, or I'm sure it even happens in large departments too, but, you can kind of shy away from those things in the fire service.
100%.
If I'm not good at something on the fire ground in a department like mine, it's kind of easy for me to fall into the shadows because there's enough hard-hitting go-getters out there that if somebody doesn't want to do the work, they're going to be the next up in line that's begging to do it. So it's easy to kind of shy away from your downfalls. But I love working with the humble guys that, the firefighter on our rig is one of the most humble people I've ever met in my life. He's the oldest guy on our truck, so
love that.
I love it. Every time we get a run, before we've even got stuff packed on the truck, it's, hey, Captain, what could I do better on this? I think I messed up here. What do you think? And most of the time it's so minuscule that he's nitpicking himself to death, but that's just the drive that he has to be the best that he could be riding that back seat.
I think one of the really interesting things you said, and you see it everywhere, and I think I'm probably guilty of it once or twice or a couple times in my life too, is kind of just blending in and letting, kind of just disappearing into the shadows while others take the lead. Like there's certain things that I'm not strong at, right? Like the tech rescue stuff, I'm not. It's not really my forte. Ropes, not my forte, right? Things like that. So I tend to just blend in with that stuff, right? Listen, I'm not going to be the guy taking the lead on lifts and things like that, right? But I will take the lead on many other things. And I think what we look at is where the fire service allows for people to hide. We're allowed to blend into the shadow and not put yourself out there. But the problem is when you're allowed to do that, you get comfortable and you are hiding. And we need you to be uncomfortable and be like, I don't want to stand in the shadows. I might not be the best guy at it, but come out of the shadow and get your hands back on it and make yourself better at it. Put in the discipline and time to go after it. And, you can find a lot of people hide when there's shit to be done and work to be done. Like when you look around on the fire ground and we still got work to do and guys are already taking a knee, or guys are, they could go harder or go further. They're choosing not to. They're looking to blend in. They're becoming, it exists. And I think we need to find a way to challenge our people to not want to blend in. I don't want you to be average. I don't want you to be mediocre. We want you to be out front taking the lead. It's so important.
I think the biggest thing for our department that kind of helped us push towards identifying that and making changes was, I think, about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, we were blessed enough to open up our own training facility. The department had never had one before. For our region, a department our size is kind of unheard of almost for us to have the facility that we've got. Before, we had a Connex burn box with a single burn room down at Station 1 that had been burning so much that if you went in and shut all the doors, you could see daylight outside. But now we've got a full training facility, 4-story burn room on the bottom floor. And to be able to go out and, it's got all the different props attached in with it. It's got a forcible entry prop, vent props, some windows for Denver drills, things like that. And to be able to go out as a crew or as a shift, or here recently we've had a couple department trainings out there, and kind of start to identify those things and put people through those reps in-house was big for us, especially big for my engine, because as I said, having a firefighter that's super humble in everything that he does, if we go out there and we put one rep in and he identifies what he thinks was his weaknesses, he's going to want to do it 10 more times.
Yeah.
That's just kind of the culture and the kind of people that we're working with.
Yes. Like, cool. For a department to give their people the tools necessary to want them, for your own firefighters to want to push and be better and get better, you give them that playground that's available to them. I think that's fantastic. I really do. For you, TCF is a self-motivator. You're holding yourself accountable because you're putting yourself out there. Putting yourself out there is not always the easiest thing to do. I mean, you basically paint a target on yourself when you're willing to start talking about the job on a different level. It's one thing to be a voice within your firehouse or within your department, but when you start putting yourself out there a little bit more, a lot of times resentment can creep in from the people around you. You can get pushback from your own department or the guys that you ride with. And then you have people on the outside looking in going, who's this guy and what's he about? I went through all this. I still go through all this every single day. It is not easy when you're willing to put a target on yourself, correct?
It's not. And, you can come from every angle. Like you said, when you first decide to kind of branch out of the walls of your own firehouse, you can have guys in your department that are looking at you like, why him? Why is he the one that's doing this? Or
yes.
It's easy to sit down around a kitchen table and talk shit about the guy who's decided to try to get out there and do something different. And then I think Kevin Pfluger said it was that he's just a nobody from nowhere. So coming from a small department too, it's easy. You got people out there, they get caught up in the big flashy names, FDNY, Chicago, LA, whatever big department you want to go to. And they're like, why is this guy from Southeast Tennessee trying to tell me something on social media?
Right.
And then on the other hand, there's no vetting on social media. Anybody can go out there and start a Instagram account or a Facebook page and put whatever information they want on the internet, and there's really no way to vet them. So I feel like social media is kind of given and it's taken from us at the same time in the fire service. I'm a big believer it's given a lot more than what it's taken, but some people have felt cautious of it because of those accounts and because of the false information and the narratives that have been pushed. So it's a lot different. And you're like you said, your face isn't just being seen in the firehouse anymore. For you're traveling the country, you're pushing out multiple podcast episodes, And pretty much anybody that's involved in the social media side of the fire service has at least heard of National Fire Radio, I would say, by today. So it's you can't go to this region and be a different person than
That's
what
right.
you were over here.
That's
you
right.
got to be the same guy at the fire conference as you are back home on the streets.
Well, and that's exactly it. And if anybody's going to hold me accountable, it's my own people. My own people have seen my failures and they've seen my successes. And that is where, for a lot of people, they get lost and confused about how this actually works. I think a lot of the success of National Fire Radio with the podcast, with the social media platform, with the relationships and the circles we run in, it's because we have never, ever strayed from the mission of being 100% transparent and authentic. I am not perfect. I don't stand here and preach. This is not. And there's a lot of things that come up in conversation that I am not an expert at, subject matter expert. There are things. I stay in my lane. I know what to talk about. I know what I'm good at. I know where my strengths are. I certainly know where my weaknesses are. This is where people get confused. They start to believe their own shit. They start to believe their own hype. And that is where you see the failure in a lot of what's happening. I want to circle back because you talked about social media vetting. I think it's super important. I think we can vet on social media. I think that you can look at the page and the personality. And one, if you have a page, are you signing your name to it? Are you taking on responsibility for the content you're putting out? If you are, that to me already ups the game in like, all right, this guy's willing to put his face and his name behind his content he's putting out. I have a hard time with pages that don't accept responsibility for their content. You don't know who's behind it. You don't know their pedigree. You don't know where they come from. You don't know what they stand for other than, information they're putting out. And then the other thing too is vetting can be as simple as who do they run with? Who do they surround themselves with? Who do they keep company with? Who are they friends with? Go through their friend profile and see who they're friends with back and forth. Who follows them, who doesn't. The all-stars in this game don't follow the nonsense, right? They don't have time for it. Just like in a firehouse. We don't, if you want to be a loser in the firehouse, we're not going to waste our time with you, right? Like, so the same thing goes for social media. So I think we can vet it. And I think what's most important is understanding that the guy from Eastern Tennessee still has a message and love for the job that he wants to share. Why can't you share it? As long as you're not going outside the parameters of what you should be talking about. I mean, if you're talking about a 5-story, walk up in an urban setting and that's not your environment, it's not what you should be talking about, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it's really knowing your lane and where you belong. But I'm a firm believer, and I'm grateful. You started off this podcast complimenting me, and I appreciate that. And I hope that, like, what we do has pushed others to want to promote this job more, to talk about the good of the job or talk about the issues that we need to tackle. And that, for me, that's the feather in the cap for National Fire Radio. If we've inspired others to do more, to get out of their slump, to get out of the recliner, to go out and take what they've been preaching in their own department and bring it to a larger level, fuck yeah, bro, let's go. That's what's, I think, super important about what we're doing.
And I wish more people would. I could just sitting here after you said that, just thinking off the top of my head, I know a multitude of people that they really don't have much involvement outside of their own department. But if they would just take that leap and get out and start sharing the same messages that they share to their guys on the rig, on a different platform, they could do it. I mean, they'd be pushing great stuff. But, not everybody wants to, there's plenty of firefighters out there that they're great guys, they're great firemen, they love the job.
Some of the best we've never heard of.
But all they want to do is they want to come in, they want to ride the rig, they want to do it in their first due, and they want to go home.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that is the beauty of what the fire service actually is that they're affecting change within their own zip code. That's great. Not everybody needs to step out and do it on a national level, but what we do need to do is find a way to bottle up their love for the job, their commitment to the others on the rig with them, how they go all in on their people, their unconditional belief in the mission of the fire service. We need to bottle that up, and then we need to be like, how do we capture that and then share that? And you can do that on your show. I can do it on my show. I started looking at my guest list, and my guest list, I have names that people know, that people teach, and then I have guys that nobody's ever heard of before. Everybody has a story to share. If you're passionate about the fire service and it's something that's important to you, and I firmly believe that that's unconditionally who you are, you have a seat on my show every single day. And I think that that's what's most important, because I want to find the guys from Eastern Tennessee that didn't step out to start a podcast, that, rides the company over from you, and you're like, this guy's a rock star. Well, if he's willing to talk to me for an hour, I can capture his love for the job and share it. That's what you can do. We don't need to interview all the 1-2%ers, the big names, the national speakers. Listen, they have enough platforms to speak on. They speak at all the conferences. They do this and that. Let's go find those guys in the fucking trenches that have an absolute love for the fire service and just don't have a way to share it outside of their own zip code. Let's go get them, because they are more relatable. Those are guys that are just your average regular dudes. That's probably a very good family man, a good, a good hobbyist and business owner, and loves being a fireman and serving his community. Those are the people we need to talk to.
And that's where I said that I feel like social media and just technology as a whole has given us a lot more than what it's taken from us, because I'm a first generation fireman, but you look back at the firemen of last generation and generations before that, they didn't have these opportunities.
No.
They didn't have the opportunity to sit down behind a computer or on a drive home from work and listen to some guy from across the country preach his message and spread his love for the job.
And back then, truthfully, if you go back a couple generations, couple decades, those guys lived it every single day. They didn't really need to listen to it in their car. We have people seeking more today because we have channels of which provide more, but they're also not getting their own fulfillment within their own firehouse. Right, and that's really a big problem. People are
we're not running fires every day.
That's true.
I mean, the job has changed so much.
It certainly has, right? I don't disagree with you, but that whole fires are down, fires are up, whatever it is, times have changed. People used to go into the firehouse and didn't have to be connected to the outside world. They didn't have cell phones. So the outside world didn't come with them. Their side job didn't come with them. Their first, second, third wives didn't come with them. Their kids' baggage didn't come with them. Think about it, right? All that shit got turned off when they walked through the threshold of that firehouse. And if they're there for 10, 14, or 24 hours to do their tour, they were all in because they had no outside influence pouring in on them. Today, they carry everything right here. Everything's right here. Their whole life is on their phone. And so now they bring that in with them. And now they become disconnected. But the one thing it does do is, since the job has changed, it allows for people to find more opportunity than ever before. If you're unhappy where you are, you now have this to go into. You can dial up your phone and look into social media and find people that share the same beliefs or thoughts that you do. You can find, groups to become members with. You can find fools organizations and conferences and podcasts and social media platforms. We have more opportunities than ever before, which is good.
There's no excuse today in 2024 to not be an invested fireman.
Right.
There's none. There's so many avenues and opportunities out there. Like you just said with your phone, doesn't cost you a dime. You don't have to be the guy that pays thousands of dollars to travel to conferences. If you can, that's great. But we're here in East Tennessee. We're really volunteer heavy, and the volunteer world here seems to be a little bit different than the northeastern model of volunteers. I don't want to talk bad about it, but I mean, there's some things that are really lacking in a lot of volunteer areas in the southeastern part of the country.
It's different.
And there's no reason to today. I mean, you don't have to have a department that has a budget to be able to send you to FDIC or send you 2 states over for a lecture series. You can get those things right here at the tip of your fingertips, like
more
you
than
said.
ever. Mm-hmm.
It's there, and that's one of the things that we're trying to focus on now that we're getting into our own trainings with TCF2s, because I said me and Enoch, we started in the same volunteer house together, and that volunteer house has a decent group of guys now that they want to learn, they want to do better, but the culture of the department is that stuff's kind of never been there.
Right.
So being lucky enough, we work for a job that if I walk into the fire chief or deputy chief's office and I ask to go to a class, if there's money for it, hey, it's bye, see you later. We went to Passion for the Craft 2 years ago for their lecture series over in North Carolina, and it was a wonderful deal. It was $100 for 2 days, and the lineup of speakers and instructors was just jam up
Yep.
for $100.
Yep.
So I went to Enoch and I was like, hey man, we can, one of us take vacation, one of us swap. It's $100. Let's go to this thing. And I went to our fire chief and asked him if we could take a city vehicle to drive that we had registered for this. And that was all we were asking for from the department, because both of us drive a F-250, and it wasn't very feasible for us to spend more in diesel than we spent to go to the conference.
Yeah, right.
And his response was like, wait, you registered for what? It's like, no. Send me your receipts. The department's going to handle this. We send you guys to that kind of stuff. So it's great to be able to work for a department that does that. But we're trying to take a lot of that stuff and stay humble in the success that we've been able to gain recently, and give that back to some of the volunteer departments around us. So that's, we've teamed up with Mercedes Textiles. They're helping push us along with some engine ops stuff, working with Hen Nozzles. And the very first engine ops class that we ever did, we went back to our volunteer department and free of charge was like, hey, here's the date. Send us everybody you've got. We want to do this with you.
I think it's great. I think it goes right to the mission of what TCF stands for, and everything that we've talked about, today, is that, you're looking to make this job better.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, you find those people out there, and I'm not going to come on a podcast and start name dropping people, but going to conferences and things like that, you find those instructors that they're there for different reasons.
Of course.
The platforms that are there for, they're not there for spreading that love for the job or spreading knowledge. They're there to pat a pocket. And I can't stand it, man. We just wrapped up our first conference under our own name, and I'd never been to this conference before. It's Tennessee River Training Weekend in Hardin County. And it was a very, very volunteer heavy conference. And I love to see that region of our state is pushing that, and that those volunteers are getting that kind of training. But whenever we put the instructor proposal in for it, we covered enough to get ourselves there and eat.
Yeah.
And that was pretty well it. We're not out here trying to make ourselves rich off of the pockets of firemen, because not everybody, like I said, comes from a department like us to where they're paying to send us everywhere. A lot of guys out here are paying out of their own paychecks to go to these conferences. I got the chance to meet James Moeller at the Bears of the Oath class.
Yeah.
And one of the most motivational guys I ever met.
That video of him is just, top shelf, right?
Will send chills down your spine every time you see it. But he was the embodiment of what a fireman stands for. And I found out through him that he was like, yeah, I've been through Georgia Smoke Divers twice, plan on going a third time. He's like, I'm here today. He's like talking about all these different conferences and stuff he goes to. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. Your department sends you there. And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, a lot of this stuff we're paying out of our pocket for.
Sure.
And that was kind of new to me, because, like I said, I'm coming from a department that, as small as a department as we are, we try to send people to FDIC every year. Like we're blessed with those opportunities, and nowhere near the amount of people that you think get to do that. A lot of these guys are taking a fireman's salary and they're spending that to make themselves better on the job.
Yeah, I totally get that. And, with all my travel and everything I get to do, you meet guys from all different walks of life, all different types of departments. The one thing that, we don't talk about a lot is the majority makeup of the American Fire Service are volunteer fire companies. And, in fact, many of them are scraping just to get by. It is literally neighbors helping neighbors. These are, rural communities where they have an engine that is 50 years old that is doing the work of fire protection for their town, and it is literally the neighbor coming to the aid of their neighbor. And we can, I think we can look at that and say, like, wow, they should do better. We need to do better. We need to make sure that communities are protected as best they can. Unfortunately, some communities, that's all they can do. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are certainly different levels within the American Fire Service. And I think we try to paint a broad stroke picture of what the fire service should be. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But the reality of the conversation is so many departments are scraping to get by, and it is literally Joe helping Frank and Frank helping Bob and Bob helping Bill if their barn catches fire or their field's on fire. And that is a real part of the conversation. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about that. You know what I'm saying?
And we've got the county where I'm at is the county services 11 separate volunteer fire departments.
Yeah.
There's no unification between them. It's not McMinn County Fire Stations 1 through 11. It's this is a department, this is a separate department. And you've got the one that I came from, Athens Rural. It's a dual purpose, Athens Rural McMinn County Rescue Squad. They're really blessed when it comes to equipment and money. They get United Way money every year. But then you go to the departments that they commonly run with, some on our side of the county, and I mean, like you said, they're scraping to keep the lights on in the station,
just to have turnout gear for their members, right? Like, this is a real conversation.
One of the things that we've got ourselves involved with that's helped a lot with helping some of these departments is they call it the Tri-State Mutual Aid Agreement.
Yeah.
So it started with Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama, and now there's some departments in North Carolina too. And Athens joined it probably 3-4 years ago. But it's huge. Like I said, it's across 4 states, and it's a mutual aid agreement to where the departments that have signed up, they take the thought of mutual aid out of the department's head. You get moved around. They don't leave your stations dry. And last year, the year before, all of our county departments joined it as well. So now it's easy for some of these struggling, smaller volunteer departments to be able to bring in better resources and the help that they need on larger scale incidents that before, they had no hope for.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And
good.
it doesn't cost them a dime to be a part of
Right.
it. So
Right. I think we do need to do a better job in regionalizing services. I think we have to look at parts of the country that do it successfully and then try to mimic that in other parts. I think there's still a lot of home rule turf. Or home turf, home rule can kill you if that's the way we've always done it. We're not willing to change. We have a lot of that in the Northeast. There should be a lot of regionalization going on and pooling resources and people to provide a better delivery and service, and we're not doing it. And people know it. It's easier to bury your head in the sand than it is to be, be out front making a difference, and and having real conversation. But that's a big part of it. I think we need to hit issues head on, just like we do in our firehouses. I mean, we got people. We've been talking about culture today. We've been talking about motivation. We need to have real conversations on a bigger level than just your own company too. It's like, what do your resources look like? What does your delivery services look like? Are they matching what you're supposed to be providing? I mean, these are topics that a lot of departments and counties are shying away from because they know they're deficient in their delivery.
And talking about the home turf, before we were a part of this mutual aid organization, some departments around us, there's kind of that stigma around like, oh, you don't want to go fight fire with those guys. They think they're know-it-alls for some departments and stuff like that. But firemen are all the same everywhere we go. And now that we've worked with a lot of these departments, we look back at some of those comments and stuff like, man, they're just like us, just different trucks. Their gear looks a little different. The names are different. One of the departments, my shift had a large church fire about 2 months ago, and the neighboring county agency to us, Bradley County, came up and they were backfilling stations for us. As you can imagine, hose everywhere by the time this fire was out. This church that was built in the 1800s, you know what happens when those buildings burn.
No such thing as small church fires.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's 5-inch everywhere. There's 3-inch stretched on ground monitors. Pretty much every 1 3/4 line off the truck is sitting somewhere out in the yard. And before they left our station, they came to the scene and they're like, we're going to go out there and help those guys pack their hose up. And they didn't leave until every stitch of hose was back on the truck. And they didn't have to. They were there for backfilling. And that's like I said, now we look back and we're like, we're glad that these guys are able to come in and help us and that we're able to go help them. Because before there may have been that stigma there, department to department. Oh, we don't want them on our turf. We don't want them coming and fighting fire in our area. And now that we are doing that, it's all the same. Everybody's the same. Like I said, they're just showing up in a different rig.
No doubt. And I think that commonality is what needs to push us, across the board. And we need to dial in on the commonality that we all do share. And I think that is where that's where it gets exciting. We were talking about opportunity and finding opportunities, through social media and what you're doing with your social media and your podcast. But that commonality is like the betterment of the job. And I believe we're actually in a pretty good place today. I talk a lot about the it used to be a subculture to want to be better at this. And now I believe today it's not the subculture, it's actually the culture. I think that the slugs and the complacent are becoming the smaller community within the fire service, and I think
they're becoming the outcast.
I believe so.
It's not okay anymore to show up and be that guy at the firehouse because we've driven that culture, and getting back, we've said it 100 times. Technology and stuff has helped push that culture nationwide as a service to where nobody wants to be that guy that shows up and drags ass every day. Especially when you've got a hard hitter riding the seat next to you.
Well, yeah, because you're going to get shown up in a second, right? Like you can't, if we create an environment where we don't allow people to hide and we hold people accountable, two things are going to happen. One, they're going to rise and become accountable, or they're going to fade away. And if they fade away, we didn't need them to begin with. I'm a firm believer in that, right? We need people to rise. We need to create, listen, standards are important. I'm not saying basic standards, but I'm saying we need to have a line that we measure against. That's just reality, right? Whether you agree with it or not. Nobody says we have to meet the standard. We need to exceed standards. Standards are like your bottom bargain. Like this is where you need to be. You must be at this level, but we want people way above the standard, right? Losers aren't going to rise to the standard. They're going to fade away. If we have a culture and environment that doesn't allow for them to hide, doesn't allow for them to be, hovering at that standard level, we want them more proficient. They're not going to want to ride in a place that requires proficiency and above the average, above the norm.
Like you said, though, eventually weed themselves out as that culture goes stronger and stronger. I mean, you brought up the standards. I've never met somebody that's good on this job that's okay with meeting that minimum. Now we revisit that minimum. We talk about basic firefighter level task all the time.
Absolutely.
I talked about that engineer syndrome and how that was something that I failed at a time in my career. And we've learned that we can't always just keep shooting for that next higher level. It's fine to set very high standards for ourselves. That's what I love to come into work and see. I want to come in and every guy on my truck be like, hey, I want to be the best that I can be at everything I can get my hands on. It's not feasible. It's not going to happen. Like you said earlier, we're all going to have our downfalls. But shoot for that. But don't forget about those minimum standards. Come back to them, revisit them, make sure that you're proficient in that. But if you're just happy with that basic level, go get on somebody else's truck.
And then there's that. Right? And that's it. And I think that sums this whole thing up. It's like the Citizens Fireman social media and podcast is there to hold yourself accountable and to push this job forward. Make sure you push yourself forward. Whatever people need to hold themselves accountable, go do it. Like I said. And the other thing too is like you can't be harsh on yourself either, because you are going to have days that you don't want to, and there's going to be days that you don't, and there's days that you won't, but then there's also days that you pick yourself back up and realize, nope, I got to keep going. And I think those are the moments that really matter. We're going to have days where people are going to pick up our slack, and then there's days we pick up other people's slack. It's just part of the process.
It's just another reason why it's the best job on earth.
Giddy up. I love that.
There's never a mundane moment on this job. Everything's different. If you're coming into work and you're doing the same thing every single day, then that's an issue that you're creating. There's no reason that you should feel like this job is boring. You know, I talked about meeting James earlier, and we talked about how motivational that video was that Passion for the Craft put out after his passing. And, you know, he said if you don't love the job, you're not doing it right. And that is the embodiment of what it's about.
Really well said. Really well said. Tyler Evans, the Citizens Fireman podcast and social media platform. Brother, thank you for joining me today on the show. What a great conversation, man. I wish you tremendous success with the platform. You're getting out there and doing some teaching now, putting some conferences together for people in your area. Bravo, man. Keep pushing.
We're trying. We're pushing hard for it. You know, we're trying to get more into the hot classes and more of the hands-on stuff ourselves right now. So we're trying to make it happen.
Yeah, well, just stay authentic and stay true to who you are, and keep letting this process build you, because that's what I've learned. You know, is like when you give yourself to this, and you allow this to take hold of you, good things happen. And
Absolutely.
I'm super grateful for the opportunities that I've had since I started National Fire Radio, which holds me accountable, and I can see the same for you for sure as you continue to grow and so on. So stay with that podcast. Don't give up on it, pal. Consistency, man.
I just
Hammer
got to
down.
find time to record.
I know it. I know it. You know, but I think there's tremendous value in it. I'm looking through. I mean, you got a great lineup of guests that you've had on, all names that people recognize. I think it's great what you're doing. Keep going, bro. Keep pushing. Good stuff.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Tyler Evans, thanks for joining me today on the show, man. I appreciate you. If people want to reach out, they want to find you on social media, if there's an email or phone number or something you want to share with them so they can get a hold of you, if there's something in this episode they liked, where can they find you?
The Citizens Fireman is on Instagram and Facebook. The podcast platform is Apple, Spotify. There's a couple older ones on YouTube. I kind of backed off on the YouTube videos because there wasn't really a lot of outreach there, but there's still some old good stuff you can pick up. We may revisit that idea again.
Awesome.
And actually, if you go to Instagram right now, we're doing a Halligan raffle for a Side Charlie Tool Heritage Bar. So good chance to maybe pick yourself up a awesome bar for $10. We're trying to put some money towards picking up a new door prop.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, I will. I'll jump over there too and get a couple tickets bought for sure for that. So, congratulations on your success with the podcast and the social media platform, and also in your career, man. Keep pushing. You know, it's a great conversation when somebody's willing to share. You know, that they were struggling in the job too and found direction and found their purpose and moves forward. And I love that story, and I think that story resonates with so many. And we need more guys like you to share their stories so that other people feel empowered to go get it. So
I got a lot of years left on the job. I just hope we stay on the right path and keep driving on from here.
Well, you keep doing what you're doing, you will. And there's no doubt. I believe that wholeheartedly. So, Tyler Evans, thanks for joining me today, bro. Stay right here. I'm going to sign off the podcast. I'm going to come right back to you, okay?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Guys, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the National Fire Radio podcast. Like I say at the end of every single episode, take this conversation, take it back to the firehouse and talk about it. Because when we're talking about the job, we are making the job better. We'll see you at the next one. Jeremy, National Fire Radio.
National Fire Radio.